So here we are. We're live, and welcome to anybody who's watching live or who is watching on catch up as well. So let's get started. First of all, welcome, Sam.
Yeah, good morning, Stephen. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, and so we've got about half an hour together, and I'm really excited to get into the conversation. But let's start with just a simple but difficult question. Who is Sam Liscio?
Oh, you see, I knew this was going to be a coachy type question. It was going to be difficult to answer because it was going to need some reflection. I don't know. The people that know me know that I've spent some time living and working in two different countries. I have that weird accent that's where I come from and where I've been, and bring a whole baggage load of experience and expertise from that background. A big blended family, 3 sons and a daughter, 3 stepkids and 1 kid, which means a big busy life, and love spending time with the kids. And they're all mostly adults now, mostly in their 20s. The little one will be 16 in the summer. So getting away with them and spending time with them is what I like to do when I'm not working and doing these kind of things. So yeah, I guess that's it. That's who I am.
Oh, that's fantastic. And there's a little bit that I'd like to dig into slightly more there, which is just, if anybody was to glance at your LinkedIn profile, which I'm sure anybody watching has, there's a really standout thing there which says Canadian CIO of the Year. I forget the year when that was, but I mean, that's a heck of an accolade. How did that come about?
Well, I think it was a convergence of circumstances, as it probably always is. The CIO Association in Canada and a publication in Canada that was called IT World Canada together every year decide on a public sector and a private sector CIO of, goes through a bit of a judging contest. And it's based largely, it certainly has been in recent years, on a transformation agenda and what a CIO as a leader is able to achieve in an organization, both with their people, with the outcomes from that, the perspective of what that particular organization's mission and vision is, and then how that relates to digital transformation. And it was in 2020, so it was the first year of the pandemic, which had, was a blessing and a curse for every CIO, because it was, how do you get the operations of your organization functioning remotely in a time when no one had conceived that you wouldn't be able to access your premises? So big IT challenge, but also a big workforce challenge at the same time as digital transformation was happening in an organization. And we were doing a new operating model and a different leadership model as well. So change upon change. And I think a reflection that happened reasonably successfully, although not without bumps along the way. So it was 2020, so I didn't get the red carpet and the big fancy champagne event. We were doing that online in the July of the COVID lockdown, when everybody in Canada and everyone in the UK was at home. So an interesting year to have that presented.
It's fantastic. And I didn't actually know the story behind that either as well, which is great. But also, I think people watching who don't know you might be observing something which is interesting as well, which is I know you as a manager and as a leader, and we've done work together in the past. And you just described something quite extraordinary in a very modest and matter-of-fact kind of way, which I think speaks to you as a person and as a leader. And that might be a nice little segue into why it was you in particular that I wanted to talk to about this topic of creating great teams and leaderful organizations. So a specific question I've got for you: what does leadership mean to you?
Well, there's a bunch of things all tied up in leadership. And the first thing I think of is there have to be people to follow in order for people to be effective leaders. And if everybody's a leader and there's no one following, then can you be an effective leader if everybody's a leader? So it's the the circumstances and the qualities that differentiate that from being a follower. And I think sometimes you need to be a leader and sometimes you need to be a follower. And I think you need to be adapting your situation to your organization, to your circumstances, to your environment, to be able to kind of move between those two things. So I think it's the idea of influencing people so that they would like to follow you in the circumstances that are win-win. They give something to the organization, but they give back to those individuals themselves too. And doing that in a way that isn't imposing something on them that they don't want to do or isn't aligned with the direction that they want to take. So very much understanding where people are and where they see themselves and what they want to do and where their passion is, and trying to align that to where the organization wants to go. And if there isn't an alignment, then being frank and being candid about that too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I have a phrase that I kind of overuse, which I picked up from a mentor some time ago, which is that leadership is a social act. It happens between people. And I think in your answer, it's quite interesting. You didn't talk about positional authority. You didn't talk about, a job title or a structure. So, that idea of leadership being a social act, I don't know. How do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely the case. And I'll maybe pull on an example from COVID. So when there was a team that was pulled together that was responsible for making sure that the organization that I was part of at the time, so a big 4,000 person organization doing daily transactions around claims management for workplace compensation. So really important stuff. People needed to continue to get their claims paid, the treatment done, and this was all happening when COVID was happening. So it was those teams that were responsible for making sure that the right equipment went to the right houses, that it got there, and that it was working in a way that enabled that productivity to continue. And that was very much sort of self-organizing. So it was, we need these experts from these different fields. Let's get all in a room with masks on. Let's say stay 2 meters apart, but let's figure out then how we do this. How do we get an inventory of people? How do we get their home addresses? How do we figure out where their equipment is across 17 different offices? And then who's going to get a van and drive this stuff around, and how's that all going to happen? And that self-organizing team, the people that ended up being the leaders in that, were different every day or every hour of every day, depending on where in that process things were. And people naturally kind of stepped up when they felt that they had that expertise to be able to drive that. And it was really interesting. Some quite introverted IT people in non-leadership positions stepping in to say, no, I think this is the way that we need to do this. And I think I have a way to do that. If we do it this way, let's see what happens. And then the team being trusting enough to kind of let that self-direction happen. And that to kind of just sit back and watch that without having to think about what are the next 3 steps and how do you direct that from a leadership perspective. Watching that kind of organically shape itself, and then kind of put a wrapper around that from a corporate reporting back to the board perspective was really, really interesting. But people's ability to be able to step up beyond where they thought they potentially could, when they have that authority and the latitude to be able to have the agency to go there. That was truly fascinating, like unique circumstances. But I think we can all stand to do that a little bit more like we did back then now.
Yeah, absolutely. Something, well, I'm a big fan of the whole self-managing teams kind of concept and those sorts of practices. One of the things I'm hearing when you speak there that is, I loved what you said about day to day, somebody different is stepping forward and going, I know about this thing. I can help with this, and stepping forward. How did you go about creating an environment where they felt they could do that, as you say, like introverted people who maybe don't have the positional authority? How, because you must have done something to make that feel okay.
Well, when in that COVID situation, it was a big whiteboard with the broad strokes of a kind of chronological sort of map of what we needed to do. So it's what are we here for? We've got to get all of this equipment out and working so that people can use it in the same way as they did last week when they were in the office. But that means everything has to change. We have to set up VPNs. We have to get that access. We have to re-architect the network. So what has to happen broadly, first, second, third, in that kind of cartoon strip way? And then having the team do that, okay, where do we need to be and what are my parts and how do I craft those? So it was, I think, seeking assurance that that was the right sequence of events from people. Yes, can we do that without this? What do we need in order to do this next thing? And then allowing that kind of self-direction within those broad buckets to get that stuff done. But it was always looking at that picture on the wall. And then we ended up actually having that in all of our home offices, a version of that. And sometimes it was people that had like just a big sheet. They projected it on the wall behind them. Others that actually did a marker on a pillowcase or something like that. But it wasn't quite the technology solution that we have with Teams or with Meet or anything now in those early days. But it was that big picture on the wall that everybody agreed to. And then the incremental bits within each of those components, having the agency for individuals to be able to direct that.
I love that. And it brings to mind as well that kind of idea of creative constraint. I don't know if you come across that, where you, that's normally done kind of as a game where you intentionally restrict people's ability. You say, what if we had no money? Or what if we lost our software? Or what if we had to do this in a day instead of a week? And then you try and create that. But I guess COVID did that to all of us and created that opportunity to innovate in a very stressful time, but created that opportunity. In more normal times, like, how do you think about creating that similar dynamic?
I think there's a lot to be said about the idea that you just talked about earlier about social leadership and getting together with people in person or as much as possible in a kind of cohesive group where you can have those brainstorming sessions, so that meetings aren't necessarily about the administrative aspects of running an agenda. They're actually about getting to that consensus around where are the constraints. And I think where that works best, those team efforts around where do we need to go and how do we get there, it's allowing that divergence of opinion. So let's break the box. Let's forget about constraints first. Be divergent in that thinking. So kind of divergent first and then converging on, okay, then how do we winnow through all of that to get to the one thing that can put us on the next step. And I think that works really well in speaking to a couple of things with individuals. It's around engagement and plugging into their passion. So I think removing the barriers first to get that divergent thinking makes people feel agency around their own expertise and how that matters. And they're not necessarily inhibited as much as they would be otherwise in putting those weird ideas on the table. And it's always the weird idea that ends up being the best idea. Like there's no wrong answer, except that this is the way we've always done it, and that's why we're going to continue to do it. So you have to kind of break that, get divergent to be able to become convergent. And it's very, very difficult to do that in a typical organizational administrative type meeting. You have to kind of facilitate that a little bit to brainstorm, bring out the best in that brainstorming. But then I think you truly get engagement and you unlock people's passion. You can find out a little bit more about what truly makes them tick, and then be able to plug into that for the alignment of what matters to me and what matters to my organization. And if I align those two things together, then that's where brilliance happens.
I love that idea. You make it sound so simple.
No, it's not at all.
It's really not. There's also like something in there that I think. So I think that leadership is something that you choose to do. You choose to do it at, different points in your life. Sometimes you can choose it from, and you've hinted at this, from one day to the next. You choose to step forward, choose to step back, choose to lead, choose to follow. You do it all of the time. However, I think there's also some practical stuff that you've really hinted at there, which is to do with changing the way you meet. Just to do things in a different way can unlock a lot of potential. I don't know. How do you think about that?
It's something that's really been resonating with me. I heard a speaker late last year, and probably 6 or so months ago. His name's Sunil Gupta, and his whole experience comes from failure. But he speaks to organizations and to leaders around how you can learn from that and how you can learn from the experience of others. And he talks very much about thinking about engagement, personal engagement, team engagement, in terms of quality of energy versus time. And I think if you've been in big organizations for a long time, you do think about productivity in terms of time. You think about a 9-to-5 day, you think about 5 working days a week, you think about sitting in front of a screen for some of those days, or sitting in an office for some of those days. And that's how you judge your worth and your contribution, subconsciously, maybe consciously. And I think breaking away from that and recognizing that individually or as a team, when you're in a flow and things are happening, amazing things are happening, you're not conscious of time. It could be, a 15-minute thing, could be something that transpires over the course of weeks. But that flow is really the quality of energy versus the time spent on that. And I think if you can tap into that with individuals, then you've got something better. But you have to really sort of nurture that. Recognize that subconscious focus on time. I need to sit at my desk from 9 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. And I might get up a couple of times and make a cup of tea, but I have to sit here and do that. And that's maybe not my most productive work or what makes me feel engaged and passionate. So I've become progressively less engaged because I think that's how my productivity should be judged and how I need to kind of represent that. And it's not that at all. So I think to your point about how do you build the space around doing things differently, meeting differently, talking differently, engaging differently. It's all about sort of breaking that subconscious shackle to the desk for 8 and 10 hours a day, and thinking about contribution in terms of that energy, that flow, rather than punching a time card.
Do you know what? I don't know if you noticed, but I literally sat forward when you started talking about energy and managing energy. Here we go. This is like, I just wanted to tell you about some reflections I've had working with teams in the last few weeks. So increasingly, one of the things that I've been doing is working with teams that have got a little bit stuck, and they're not quite sure why they're not getting things done, why it doesn't feel right, why things are a little bit wrong. And so it's kind of my job to sort of reverse engineer that a bit and ask questions and figure out, like, where is it going wrong? And then to help people to understand how they might fix the elements of it that are going wrong. But in doing that repeatedly and working with individuals, I feel like I've started to observe something that's more universal, that is happening to people all over the world. And then I've started to feed that back and test that theory with people. And it goes something like this. I'd love to know how you feel about it. Is everybody that's watching this, and everybody pretty much that the people who are watching this, they work with, are all knowledge workers. That's what we do. We are here. We're not using our hands as a means of production, apart from typing on a keyboard. We're using our brains, we're using our minds, and we're using our energy to create new things, to create opportunities, to create relationships, to nurture things, to your point. And so if we're going to make the best use of our, let's just focus on mind for a moment, best use of your mind, and your mind needs to be in a good state in order that you can do good work. And the old model, the one that you kind of pointed out doesn't work, kind of comes from like factory thinking, doesn't it? You switch the machine on at 8 a.m. in the morning, you switch it off at 6 p.m. You can produce X number of widgets. You can measure this worker against that worker, how productive they are by the number of widgets that are there at the end of the day. And that's it. Now, in that mode of thinking, if you think about rest, what you can do is you can say to yourself, right, I'm going to work all day, produce my widgets, and then I'm going to rest. And then I'm going to work hard all week, and at the weekend, I'm going to rest. And then I work hard for a few months, and I'm going on holiday to rest. And that makes sense in that model. But in knowledge work, I think it needs to be the other way around. And I think if we flip the script in our minds, so what if you wake up in the morning and you think, I need to be a productive worker. And by the way, I don't think we have good measures of productivity for knowledge workers, but park that. I need to do good work today. Then get your meditation in first. Get your run in first. Get your, like we were both joking, weren't we? We both got our kind of like green liquids to hand, you know. Do those things first. And then you give yourself more opportunity to be in flow, to be genuinely productive, to make good use of your time. So I feel like I'm still like inching towards I said this was universal and maybe I didn't explain it perfectly, but I don't know, those kinds of ideas, how do they land with you?
I think that's so profound, that acknowledgement that that knowledge work isn't, you're not a commodity, you're not a cog in a factory process, but yet all of our management theory and all of our organizational processes tend to be geared to that production line model. I don't know about you, Stephen, I'm pretty sure, but I don't want to be a commodity, a widget in that process. There's more that I can offer as a creative individual to change. But if I think about the mental energy to be part of that creativity, you wouldn't approach anything where you required physical strength or dexterity without exercising your muscles properly, without having a regime where you were actually training yourself to be able to do that thing. If you think about professional athletes, a lot of their time is spent in active recovery. So it's not all about the time that they put in on the training pitch or in the gym or any of those things where they're building that strength and that physicality. It's all about that, going for the massage afterwards, getting the right nutrition to be able to recover, and rest and recuperation. And I don't think we think about that in terms of mental energy nearly enough. But this is where I get really excited about things like AI. Because I think if we've been for the last 50 years in this kind of production line methodology around knowledge workers and it not really being a fit, if AI can start taking on that commodity work and humans can really be engaged then where human judgment and empathy become important, then we can really be thinking about work that really makes us passionate. And all of that administrative stuff can be handled by machines because humans aren't good at it. We don't like it. I think there's a lot to be said about that idea of energy, but recognizing that you need to look after yourself to be able to perform that way. And then, you know, in the future, 10 years from now, we might not have to be thinking about that, breaking that mold quite so much because machines will be doing all of our drudgery stuff, hopefully.
I like that. I think we need to do another live on the opportunities by AI because in the next 5 or 6 minutes, I'm not sure we could get into that. But something you were saying there, I feel like I've got a confession to make almost, but it's not really a confession. It's just I feel like I recognized early on in my career that I couldn't be productive for 40 hours a week, you know, because that's not what I could bring to an organization. What I could bring was things like insight, empathy, bringing people together, spotting issues, spotting solutions, things like that. And I couldn't grind that out for 7 hours a day. And so I didn't. I did other things, found ways to occupy my mind, found ways to be creative, in order that maybe only for 3 hours a week, I'm genuinely like really, really focused and doing something. But those 3 hours could have huge benefits for months and years to come. Now, the challenge there, though, was I'm contracted to be sat there for however many hours a day. So there's a real issue with just guilt. Like I should be doing something else. I know that wouldn't work, but I ought to be doing something else. And I think we've got a real challenge to help people, help organizations, help teams to realize that there's an opportunity to unlock here.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. And unlocking that is so challenging when most knowledge workers look at their diary and their day is entirely taken up with meetings where they don't feel that they need to be there or they can make an active contribution, or with responding to emails or administrative tasks that don't actually help them do what they want to be able to do in terms of their performance and learning plan and in terms of the betterment of the strategy of the organization. But it's that whole notion of productivity. How do you measure creative insights? How do you measure being an agent of change? How do you measure advancing things in terms of doing things differently? You can't do that by, saying, yeah, well, I sat and responded to emails and was in meetings all day today. But what did you actually achieve? I don't know. And getting around the guilt of that. Because, I'm not in a full-time job role anymore. And it's still very difficult for me not to think I'm not being productive if I'm not sitting in front of screens.
Yeah. I found it difficult. So I used to be in full-time, well, I'm still in full-time work, but I work for myself now. And it took me a good couple of months, probably more actually, to not feel guilty if I wasn't sat down at my desk. But I'm sure this might be a nice note to kind of end it on, Sam. It can be done. Maybe people watching don't have to go quite as radical as quitting their job or whatever. But I think what I eventually realized was that I needed to understand myself. How does it feel to be feeling good, prepared to do some work? So it's almost like, to your sporting analogy, how would I feel if I was on the start line, well ready to go when the starting gun is fired? What would that feel like? And I came to realize, and it's to circle back to something I said before, is that for me, if I go to the gym or meditate or do some breath work or go for a walk in the countryside or literally sit and stare at this ceiling first in the morning, if I give myself that first, then the rest of the day flows. But that is such a backwards way of thinking about it, isn't it? It's the opposite of that. I get to the end of the day and I reward myself with a glass of wine, or I decompress by going to the gym, or I get rid of stress by meditating. Flip the script, do it the other way around, and actually you start to see some of these benefits accrue.
It's tapping into that energy.
Yeah. As my instruction to you is, next time you feel this, feet on the desk, stare at the ceiling, and then see how it goes. Great.
I like that.
Well, that feels like a nice place to end it. I mean, I could talk to you all day, Sam, and I'm like super grateful to you for giving up your time to do this. I mean, genuinely could probably talk to you for about a week, I think. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe one day you'd be willing to come back and do this again. We could find another topic. But in the meantime, just on behalf, I'm sure there'll be people that have got so much insight out of watching this and hearing you speak. And I'm sure you wouldn't mind if they reach out on LinkedIn and if they've got any questions.
Yeah, not at all. That's the best place, and we can continue the conversation if anybody's interested. And very happy to come back. Always happy. Such a pleasure to talk to you, Stephen. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Sam. Right, there we go. I'll press the big red button that says end stream. I hope anybody watching this is having and will have a brilliant day. So bye-bye.